Story 1. The Direction Lock. Patricia Hensley had been hiking southbound from Katahdin for 3 weeks when she realized she couldn't turn around. Not metaphorically, not in the sense of commitment to her journey. Literally couldn't physically turn her body to face north. It started subtly. On day 22, Patricia wanted to look back at a vista she'd just passed. She turned her head, felt a gentle resistance like moving through water. She pushed through it and looked back, but the sensation was uncomfortable. A pressure against her movement, suggesting she shouldn't be facing that direction. The next morning, Patricia tried to walk back 50 feet to retrieve a water bottle she'd left at her campsite. She turned around, took 3 steps north, and felt the resistance increase. Not pain exactly, but a wrongness. Her body knew she shouldn't be moving this direction. After 6 steps, the resistance became physical force. Patricia pushed against it, straining but couldn't move forward. An invisible barrier prevented northward travel. She walked south away from camp and movement was effortless. Turned around to try again for the water bottle and the barrier was still there. Patricia stood at the invisible wall, reaching forward. Her hands passed through easily, but her body couldn't. Something prevented southbound hikers from moving north. Patricia left the water bottle behind and continued hiking south. She assumed it was a temporary phenomenon, maybe related to exhaustion or dehydration. But over the next 3 days, the direction lock strengthened. She couldn't turn her head north anymore, couldn't twist her torso to face backward. Her body was locked in southward orientation. At a shelter, Patricia met another southbound hiker named Yuki. She asked if Yuki had experienced anything strange. "Can you turn around?" Patricia asked. "What do you mean?" "Physically turn your body to face north." Yuki tried, her face contorted with effort. She managed to rotate perhaps 30 degrees before stopping. "There's something stopping me, like a magnet repelling." They experimented together. Both could move freely in any direction except north. They could face east or west without issue, but northward rotation was blocked. The further south they'd hiked, the stronger the lock became. A northbound hiker arrived at the shelter that evening. Patricia and Yuki asked him to try turning south. He rotated easily, no resistance. The direction lock only affected hikers traveling opposite to the trail's designated direction. "The trail has a current," the northbound hiker said. His name was Marcus, and he'd been through hiking since April. "I've heard about this. Southbounders get locked into southward motion, can't turn back, can't reverse. The trail flows north to south for no-bow hikers, south to north for so-bow hikers, but if you try to move against your flow, the trail resists." "How do we break it?" Patricia asked. "You don't. You finish your hike or you exit the trail laterally, but you can't reverse direction. Once you've committed to a direction, the trail holds you to it." Patricia tried exiting the trail the next day. She hiked east toward a road crossing, leaving the AT entirely. But even off the trail, the direction lock persisted. She couldn't face north. Her body was permanently oriented southward, locked into the direction she'd been traveling. Over the next week, the lock became more severe. Patricia couldn't even turn her head slightly northward. Her eyes were locked forward. To see anything behind her, she had to use a mirror or her phone's camera. Her neck had lost the ability to rotate backward. Her body was being restructured around southward motion. Muscles that enabled backward movement were atrophying. Her joints were stiffening in forward-facing positions. Patricia was becoming a person who could only move one direction. She met other southbounders experiencing the same thing. A hiker named Chen, who'd been hiking south for 2 months, couldn't bend backward at the waist anymore. His spine had locked into forward-leaning position. Another hiker named Francine had lost peripheral vision in the directions perpendicular to her travel. She could only see a narrow cone ahead of her, tunnel vision pointing south. "We're becoming arrows," Francine said. "The trail is turning us into directional beings. We can only go one way. Everything else is being removed." Patricia tried to adapt. She developed systems for functioning without the ability to turn north, used mirrors to see behind, walked backward occasionally to stretch muscles, but even backward walking felt wrong, like her body was punishing her for the attempt. By Virginia, Patricia couldn't sleep lying down anymore. Her body required a head-south orientation at all times. If she tried to lie with her head pointing any other direction, immediate nausea and dizziness overcame her. She had to sleep sitting up, facing south, or reclined with her head southward. Her digestive system changed. Food moved through her only when she was facing or moving south. If she stood still facing east or west, digestion stopped. Her body only processed food during southward movement. Patricia was becoming a creature of pure direction. All her biological functions were aligning with southward motion. She existed only in the context of moving south. Any other orientation or direction was being edited out of her physical capabilities. Other southbounders reported similar transformations. Chen's heart rate would drop dangerously low if he stopped moving south for more than 30 minutes. Francine had lost the ability to move her eyes left or right. Her vision was locked straight ahead, eternally pointing south. At a shelter in Tennessee, Patricia encountered a hiker who'd been locked for 6 months. A man named Douglas who'd started his southbound hike in April and was now barely recognizable as human. His body had streamlined. Arms had become vestigial, hanging uselessly because arms weren't necessary for southward motion. His legs were grotesquely overdeveloped, massive muscles optimized purely for walking south. Douglas's face had changed. His eyes had migrated to the front of his skull, both pointing forward, optimized for southward vision. His ears had shifted, one facing forward and one backward, giving him directional audio without needing to turn his head. His neck had disappeared, his head mounted directly on his torso in permanent forward-facing orientation. "The trail is optimizing us," Douglas said, his voice strange from a restructured throat. "Removing everything that isn't necessary for southward motion. Eventually we'll be perfect. Pure direction. No wasted energy on rotation or peripheral awareness. Just forward, just south, just hiking." Patricia looked at Douglas in horror. He was becoming an organism designed solely for walking in one direction. Evolution compressed into months, driven by the trail's directional current, removing every feature that wasn't optimized for southward progress. "How far does it go?" Patricia asked. "I don't know. I'm not done yet. Check back in a few months." Patricia tried to leave the trail permanently. She hitched a ride to a nearby town, checked into a hotel, tried to establish normal life. But the direction lock dominated everything. She couldn't sit in chairs unless they faced south, couldn't use bathrooms oriented other directions, couldn't interact with people if doing so required facing north. Within 3 days, she returned to the trail. The lock was too severe. Normal life was impossible when you couldn't face most directions. The only place Patricia could function was on the southbound trail, moving south, existing purely in the context of directional motion. She reached Georgia in late October, the southern terminus at Springer Mountain. Patricia stood at the summit, having completed her southbound thru-hike. She'd walked 2,190 miles exclusively south. Her body was now completely directionally locked. Patricia tried to turn north. The resistance was absolute. She couldn't rotate even 1 degree. Her body existed only in southward orientation. North didn't exist for her anymore. It had been edited out of her possible directions. She touched the terminus plaque and felt nothing. No release, no change. The direction lock remained. Patricia was permanently locked facing south. in a body optimized for southward motion at the southern end of a trail with nowhere left to go. Other southbound finishers were there. Chen, whose arms had almost completely absorbed into his body. Francine, whose eyes had fused into a single forward-facing organ. Douglas, who barely looked human anymore, just a southward-pointing organism. They stood at Springer Mountain, bodies facing south, unable to turn around, unable to celebrate their finish because celebration required multi-directional movement. They were arrows that had reached their target, still pointing forward, unable to stop being arrows. Patricia tried walking south off the mountain, but south from Springer Mountain meant leaving the trail, entering the forest beyond. Without the trail's southward current, Patricia's locked body didn't function. She walked 50 feet into the southern forest and collapsed. Her body had been optimized for trail-specific southward motion. Off the trail, she couldn't move. She crawled back to the trail and stood at the terminus. She'd completed a through hike but was now trapped at the finish. She couldn't leave because her body only worked on the trail. She couldn't go north because of the direction lock. She could only stand at the southern terminus, locked facing south. A finished hiker who couldn't stop hiking because stopping meant facing a direction her body no longer recognized. Patricia is still there. So are Chen, Francine, Douglas, and dozens of other southbound finishers, standing at Springer Mountain, bodies facing south, locked into eternal southward orientation with nowhere to go. They've become monuments to directional hiking, organisms so optimized for one direction that they lost the ability to exist in any other. If you hike southbound on the AT and feel resistance when turning north, leave immediately. The direction lock is setting in. Your body is being restructured around southward motion. Everything that enables other directions is being removed. Keep hiking and you'll finish your through hike, but you'll finish as an arrow, a directional organism locked forever facing south with no way to turn around, no way to leave, no way to be anything other than a southbound hiker who can't stop being southbound even after the trail has ended. The current is strong and it doesn't let go. It optimizes you for direction, and optimization means removing everything else. Patricia started as a person hiking south. She finished as south itself, pure direction, unable to be anything else, standing at a terminus she can't leave because leaving would require facing a direction that no longer exists in her reconstructed body. Story 2. The Food Rejection. Malcolm Torres started rejecting food on day 40 of his through hike. Not loss of appetite, not hiker hunger fading. His body physically refused to process normal food. He'd eat a meal and 30 minutes later he'd vomit it up completely undigested. The food came back exactly as it went in, chewed but otherwise unchanged. Malcolm thought it was a stomach virus. He switched to bland foods, rice and crackers. Same result, vomited up intact. He tried liquids, protein shakes, sports drinks. Everything came back up unchanged. His body was rejecting all conventional food. But Malcolm didn't feel hungry. Despite eating nothing that stayed down, despite losing what should be thousands of calories daily, he felt fine, energized even. His hiking pace was strong. His body was functioning normally except for the inability to process food. At a trail town, Malcolm went to a clinic. Doctors ran tests. His blood work was normal. Stomach scans showed no abnormalities. He was healthy by every measure except he couldn't digest food and hadn't successfully eaten in 5 days. "You should be starving," the doctor said. "Your body has no caloric intake, but your metabolism is functioning. You're getting energy from somewhere." Malcolm had noticed he felt best when hiking through certain areas, dense forest with old-growth trees. He'd feel energized, almost euphoric. In contrast, hiking through cleared sections or burned areas left him feeling weak. A thru-hiker named Simone suggested Malcolm might be photosynthesizing. Some hikers develop the ability to absorb energy directly from their environment. They stop needing food. Their bodies learn to pull nutrients from air, sunlight, soil. You might be transitioning. Malcolm dismissed this as trail folklore. But over the next week, the pattern became undeniable. He felt strongest in sunlight, hiking through green forests. He felt weak indoors in towns away from vegetation. His body was drawing energy from the environment, replacing food consumption with some form of environmental absorption. His skin began to change. A greenish tint appeared, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Malcolm's arms and face took on a chlorophyll-like color. His dermatologist had no explanation. Your skin cells show unusual structures, almost like plant cells. You're developing chloroplasts in your epidermis. Malcolm's need for water increased dramatically. He was drinking 6 liters per day, far more than normal. But he didn't urinate more frequently. His body was absorbing and using all the water like a plant would. His hair stopped growing. Then it changed texture, becoming more fibrous, more like plant material than human hair. Malcolm pulled out a strand and examined it. The structure looked like a root fiber, not a hair shaft. Other hikers noticed the changes. "You're turning green," a hiker named Kevin said, "and you smell different, like chlorophyll, like grass." Malcolm's sense of taste changed. Food that he'd previously enjoyed was now repulsive. The smell of cooked meat made him nauseous. But soil smelled appealing. Humus, decomposing leaves, rich earth. Malcolm found himself craving dirt. He tried eating soil at a campsite. His body accepted it. For the first time in 3 weeks, something stayed down. Malcolm consumed a handful of rich forest soil and his body processed it. He felt nutrients flowing through his system, absorbed from the earth. "You're becoming a plant," Simone said. She'd been researching photosynthetic hikers and found scattered reports. Rare, but it happens. Hikers who spend months in the forest, their bodies adapt. Start pulling nutrients from soil, energy from sunlight. They become hybrid organisms, part human, part plant. Malcolm's transformation accelerated. His toes began growing root-like projections. When he walked barefoot, the roots would dig into soil, absorbing nutrients directly through his feet. His fingernails became harder, more like thorns. His skin thickened into bark-like texture on his forearms and legs. He slept less, but needed more direct ground contact. Malcolm would sleep directly on soil without a sleeping pad, his body absorbing minerals through skin contact. In the morning, he'd leave behind a patch of lighter soil, depleted of nutrients. Other hikers avoided him. Malcolm's appearance was unsettling. Green skin, root-like hair, bark-textured patches on his body. He looked like a person transitioning into a tree caught halfway between human and plant. Malcolm's thought processes changed. He became more aware of plant life around him, could sense trees, knew when they were stressed or thriving. His consciousness was expanding to include the forest. He wasn't just hiking through it, he was becoming part of it. Speech became difficult. Malcolm's vocal cords were changing, becoming less suited for human language. His voice had a rustling quality like wind through leaves. Words came slowly, as if speaking required accessing a system no longer optimized for verbal communication. By Virginia, Malcolm was barely recognizable as human. His skin was dark green, fully photosynthetic. His hair had become a mass of root fibers that he had to keep trimmed or they'd grow down his back. His fingers were elongating into branch-like appendages, making it difficult to hold trekking poles. He stopped using shelters. Malcolm would camp in clearings where he could root his feet into soil and spread his arms to maximize sun exposure. He'd stand for hours in this position, absorbing energy, more plant than person. Other hikers would see him and assume he was a weird trail sculpture, not realizing it was a person transforming. Malcolm's metabolism had completely replaced food with environmental absorption. He pulled nitrogen from soil through his feet, carbon from air through modified breathing, energy from sunlight through his chloroplast-rich skin, water from the ground through his root system. He was photosynthesizing, truly existing as a hybrid organism. His mind changed last. Malcolm's thoughts became slower, more diffuse, less focused on goal-oriented human concerns, more attuned to seasonal cycles, weather patterns, the slow time scale of plant life. He stopped caring about finishing his thru-hike. The concept of destination became meaningless when you experience time like a tree. By Pennsylvania, Malcolm stopped hiking. He found a clearing with good sun exposure, rich soil, and reliable water. He stood there, feet rooted, arms spread, and didn't move. Days passed, weeks. His body continued transforming, becoming more plant-like, less mobile. Other hikers reported seeing him. There's a tree person off the trail near Lehigh Gap. Used to be a hiker, now he's just standing there, rooted in the ground. Still breathing, still alive, but not human anymore. Malcolm's consciousness fragmented. Part of him was still human, aware of what he'd been. But most of him had transitioned to plant awareness. He experienced time differently now. A day was like a moment. A season was like an hour. He was becoming a tree, and trees don't think in human terms. His body completed its transformation over the following months. Malcolm's legs fused into a trunk. His arms became branches. His root-like hair grew into his scalp and spread through his internal structure, becoming a vascular system. His green skin thickened into bark. His eyes remained barely visible in the bark, occasionally blinking, but seeing in a way that wasn't quite human vision. By the following spring, Malcolm was a tree. A strange hybrid tree with a vaguely human form. Trunk shaped like fused legs, branches positioned like arms. But functionally, biologically, he was a tree, rooted in place, photosynthesizing, growing slowly, existing in plant time. Hikers still see him. The hiker tree near Lehigh Gap. If you look close, you can see the face in the bark, eyes that still blink occasionally. It used to be a person who stopped eating food and learned to photosynthesize, kept transforming until there was nothing human left. Just a tree that remembers being a person. Malcolm's consciousness persists in a limited way. He's aware of hikers passing, aware of seasons changing, but his thoughts are plant thoughts now, slow and diffuse, concerned with water and sunlight and the gradual passage of years. He'll stand in that clearing for decades, maybe centuries, a tree that used to be a thru-hiker, rooted permanently in the forest he once walked through. The food rejection happens to a few hikers each year, bodies that stop processing conventional food and learn to absorb energy from the environment. Most people leave the trail when it starts, return to normal eating, and the transformation reverses. But some, like Malcolm, continue. They embrace the change, keep hiking while their bodies adapt, and eventually they transform completely. They become the hiker trees, hybrid organisms rooted along the AT, standing in clearings, former people who transitioned into plants. Their human consciousness fades over time, replaced by plant awareness. They photosynthesize what used to be their memories, root systems spreading where thought processes used to be. They stand as warnings to other hikers. If your body starts rejecting food, leave immediately. Don't let the transformation continue, because if you do, you'll stop being a hiker walking through the forest. You'll become the forest itself, rooted and permanent, growing in place where you used to walk. A tree with eyes that remember being human but can't remember what human meant. Story 3. The Sound Ahead. Jackson Reed first heard the sound on day 53 of his thru-hike. A voice calling his name from ahead on the trail, distinct and clear. Jackson. Just his name, nothing else. Jackson called back. "Hello?" No response. He continued hiking, assuming another hiker was ahead. But when he rounded the bend where the voice had come from, no one was there. 20 minutes later, he heard it again. "Jackson!" From ahead, around the next turn, same voice, same tone. Jackson jogged forward. The trail was empty. This pattern continued for hours. Every 15 to 20 minutes, Jackson would hear his name called from ahead. He'd hurry forward, find no one. The voice was leading him, pulling him forward, always just out of sight. At a shelter that evening, Jackson asked other hikers if they'd heard anyone calling names. A hiker named Teresa looked uncomfortable. "I've been hearing my name for 3 days," she said. "Always ahead. I can never catch up to who's saying it. I thought I was going crazy." Another hiker named Omar admitted the same thing. "For a week now, my name called from ahead. I hike faster, try to reach whoever's calling, but they're always ahead of me." The three of them compared experiences. The voice was always ahead, always calling their specific name, always staying just out of reach. None of them had ever seen the source. "It's pulling us forward," Omar said, "making us hike faster, push harder. I've been doing 30-mile days trying to catch up. My body is destroyed, but I can't stop. I need to know who's calling me." Teresa had developed insomnia. "I lie awake at night listening for my name. Even when it's not being called, I hear echoes of it. My brain is stuck searching for the source." Over the next week, Jackson became obsessed with the voice. He'd hike aggressively, pushing toward each call of his name. The voice became more frequent, every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes. Always ahead, always calling, never reachable. Jackson's hiking pace increased dramatically. He was covering 35 miles per day, driven by the need to reach the voice. His body was breaking down from overexertion, but stopping felt impossible. The voice ahead was calling him, and he had to answer. Other hikers reported seeing Jackson. He looked frantic, almost running up the trail. Kept saying he was trying to catch up to someone, but there was no one ahead of him. Teresa's condition worsened. She hiked 40 miles one day, destroying her knees, convinced the voice was just a little bit further. She collapsed at a shelter, unable to walk, still hearing her name called from the distance. "It's never going to let me catch up," she said. "The voice is always ahead. It's pulling me forward until I break." Omar pushed the hardest. He hiked 45 miles in a single day, racing toward his name being called. At the end of the day, exhausted and delirious, he tried to explain what he understood. "The trail is calling us, using our names to pull us forward. It wants us to hike faster, push harder, destroy ourselves, trying to reach something that's always ahead. It's like a psychological fishing lure. We're chasing our own names into exhaustion." Jackson tried to resist. He deliberately hiked slowly, ignored the calls of his name. But the voice became more insistent. "Jackson, Jackson, Jackson!" Louder, more urgent, demanding response. His body involuntarily walked faster. He couldn't help it. The voice was pulling him physically, not just psychologically. By Pennsylvania, Jackson was hiking 50 miles per day. Impossible mileage, destroying his body, driven by the constant calls of his name from ahead. He'd hike through the night, through storms, through dangerous terrain. The voice demanded progress, and Jackson couldn't resist. He encountered Omar at a shelter. Omar was barely conscious, lying on the floor, feet bleeding through his destroyed boots. He'd hiked 60 miles that day. "Almost caught it," Omar whispered. "Heard my name so close, just ahead. Just a little more." Omar died that night, heart failure from exhaustion. His last words were reaching toward the trail. "I can still hear it calling." Teresa quit her hike in New York. She couldn't walk anymore, her body completely broken. But in the hospital, she still heard her name being called. "Teresa!" From the direction of the trail, always ahead, always pulling. Jackson couldn't quit. The voice had complete control. "Jackson!" Every minute now, constant calling, pulling him forward with irresistible force. He hiked 60-mile days, 70-mile days. His body was skeletal, his mind shattered, but he walked. The voice demanded it. Other hikers tried to stop him, rangers tried to intervene, but Jackson would fight past them, needing to get back on trail, needing to follow his name being called. He was addicted to the pursuit. His entire existence focused on catching the voice that stayed eternally ahead. Jackson reached Vermont, having hiked from Pennsylvania in 6 days. Over 300 miles in less than a week, averaging more than 50 miles per day through brutal terrain. His body was destroyed. His feet were infected stumps. His legs were broken in multiple places, but he kept walking. The voice ahead wouldn't let him stop. At a road crossing, a ranger physically restrained Jackson, held him down while calling for medical evacuation. Jackson fought like a wild animal, screaming that he needed to keep hiking, that his name was being called and he had to answer. They sedated him and airlifted him to a hospital. Even unconscious, Jackson's legs twitched in walking motions. His lips moved, whispering his own name over and over. In the hospital, despite sedation, despite physical restraints, Jackson could hear it. "Jackson!" called from the north, from the direction of the trail, always ahead. The voice had imprinted on his brain. He'd never escape it. Jackson died 3 days later. Cause of death: multi-organ failure from extreme overexertion. But the nurses said his last moments were strange. He'd sat up despite all his injuries, despite the impossibility of movement, and started walking. Not real walking, more like the motion of walking while held in place. His legs pumped, his arms swung, and his eyes fixed on something ahead that no one else could see. His last word was his own name. Jackson. Not a response to being called. He was calling himself, becoming both the voice ahead and the person chasing it. The pursuit had merged into a loop. Jackson chasing Jackson, voice calling voice, eternally ahead and eternally pursuing. The sound ahead still calls to hikers. Names heard from ahead on the trail, pulling people forward, making them hike faster and faster, trying to catch up. Most people dismiss it as wind or other hikers. But some, the ones who hear their own name clearly and distinctly, they start chasing. And once you start chasing your name being called from ahead, you can't stop. You'll hike yourself to death trying to catch up to a voice that's always one turn ahead, always a little further, always calling, never reachable. Teresa never recovered. She's in a long-term care facility, unable to walk, still hearing her name called. "Teresa!" From ahead, from the direction of the trail, pulling her towards something she'll never reach. If you thru-hike and hear your name called from ahead, don't respond, don't chase it, don't try to catch up. The voice is a lure pulling you into destructive pursuit. It will use your name to pull you forward until you break, until you die chasing yourself, until you become like Jackson, a person who pursued his own name into exhaustion and death, and whose ghost now might be one of the voices ahead, calling out to other hikers, pulling them into the same infinite pursuit that killed him. Always ahead, always calling, never catching up, forever. Story 4. The blister spread. Christina Walsh developed a small blister on her left heel around mile 200, completely normal for thru-hikers. She drained it, applied bandage, continued hiking. Standard blister management. But this blister didn't heal. It grew. By the next day, it had doubled in size. Christina drained it again, used moleskin, changed her socks. The blister continued expanding. Within 3 days, the blister covered her entire heel. Within a week, it had spread halfway up her foot. The affected area was a massive, fluid-filled sac, painful but functional. Christina could still hike, though each step hurt. At a clinic in Damascus, a doctor examined it. "I've never seen a blister spread like this. It's behaving more like an infection, but tests show no bacteria. Your body is just producing massive amounts of blister fluid. The doctor lanced and drained it. 2 cups of clear fluid emerged. But within hours, the blister refilled. Christina's body was generating blister fluid faster than it could be removed. Take a week off, the doctor advised. Complete rest, let it heal. But Christina couldn't afford a week off. She was on a schedule trying to finish before winter. She wrapped the blister carefully and kept hiking. The blister spread up her leg. By Virginia, it covered her entire left foot and ankle. The skin was distended, shiny, filled with fluid. Christina looked like she had a water balloon attached to her foot. But she could still walk. The blister fluid cushioned her steps, actually making hiking less painful in some ways. Other hikers were disturbed by her appearance. "You need to get off the trail," a hiker named Devin said. "That's not a normal blister, something's seriously wrong." But Christina felt fine. The blister didn't hurt much. It wasn't infected. Her body was just producing fluid, creating this massive expanding blister that now covered her left leg up to her knee. She researched expanding blisters and found almost nothing. One obscure medical journal article from 1987 described a similar case. A hiker in Colorado had developed a blister that spread to cover most of his body. The condition was called cascade blistering. Once started, the body couldn't stop producing blister fluid. The affected person would gradually become one giant blister. The article's conclusion was disturbing. Patient discontinued treatment after 6 months. Current whereabouts unknown. Condition assumed to have progressed to full body involvement. Christina's blister continued spreading. Her left leg was entirely covered by mid-Virginia. The skin from her toes to her hip was one continuous fluid-filled sac. She looked grotesque, her leg swollen to 3 times its normal size with blister fluid. But she adapted. The fluid-filled leg actually supported weight better than normal. The cushioning made hiking easier. Christina's pace increased. She was doing 25-mile days with one leg that was entirely blister. The blister crossed to her right leg at her groin. Within a week, her right leg was blistering too. Christina was now hiking on 2 legs that were both massive fluid-filled sacs. She looked inhuman, her lower body swollen grotesquely, but she hiked faster than ever. "It's like having built-in suspension," Christina explained to horrified sheltermates. "The fluid absorbs impact. I don't feel my joints anymore. I'm hiking on cushioned blister legs and it's actually more efficient." Her torso started blistering in Pennsylvania. The fluid spread upward, covering her stomach and chest. Christina's entire body was becoming one enormous blister. Her skin was stretched thin, transparent, showing pink fluid underneath. She should have been in agony, but Christina felt nothing. The nerves in the blistered areas had stopped functioning. She was numb over most of her body, aware of the massive fluid accumulation only visually. At a hospital in Pennsylvania, doctors tried to drain the fluid. They removed 30 gallons. Christina's body collapsed temporarily into normal shape, but within 24 hours, all 30 gallons had regenerated. Her body was producing blister fluid at an impossible rate. "We don't understand the mechanism," a doctor said. "Your body has converted most of its fluid production into blister fluid generation. You're like a water balloon. If we drain you, you just refill." Christina left the hospital and returned to the trail. Her body was 90% blister now. Only her head and hands remained unaffected. She looked like a person-shaped water balloon, sloshing with each step, distended and transparent. Other hikers avoided her. Christina's appearance was nightmare-inducing, but she hiked faster than almost anyone. The blister cushioning made her incredibly efficient. She was covering 35-mile days easily, her fluid-filled body bouncing along the trail. By New York, Christina's hands blistered. She lost the ability to grip trekking poles. Her fingers swelled with fluid until they couldn't bend. She hiked with useless balloon hands, unable to hold anything. Her face started blistering in Vermont. Christina's cheeks and forehead filled with fluid. Her features became distorted, face swelling into a round balloon shape. Her eyes were forced shut by the fluid accumulation. She was hiking blind, navigating by sound and memory. Christina's speech became impossible. Her throat and mouth blistered. She communicated through gestures with her swollen hands, though even those became less effective as the blistering worsened. By the time she reached New Hampshire, Christina was almost entirely blister. A person-shaped sack of fluid, over 200 gallons of blister fluid contained in her stretched skin. She weighed over 2,000 pounds, most of it fluid, yet she still hiked, each step a sloshing bounce, moving impossibly fast despite her massive fluid-filled body. Rangers tried to stop her. "You're not human anymore, you're a medical emergency." But Christina couldn't respond and wouldn't stop. She pushed past them, sloshing forward, determined to reach Katahdin. Other hikers reported seeing her. A massive person-shaped water balloon hiking the trail. You could see fluid sloshing inside the transparent skin. It used to be a person. Now it's just a giant blister that somehow moves. Christina reached the base of Katahdin in October. She weighed over 2,500 pounds of blister fluid. Her skin was stretched impossibly thin, transparent membrane containing hundreds of gallons of fluid. She couldn't see, couldn't speak, couldn't use her hands. But she started climbing. The climb up Katahdin took her 16 hours. Other hikers watched in horror and fascination as the giant blister person slowly bounced up the mountain. With each step, her fluid-filled body sloshed, threatening to rupture. At the summit, Christina touched the sign, and her skin burst. Over 2,500 pounds of blister fluid exploded across Katahdin's summit. The fluid poured down the mountain in a wave, soaking everything. When it cleared, Christina's body was visible. Deflated skin looking like shed snakeskin, the person inside completely gone. Just empty skin that used to contain a hiker who'd become a blister. No one found Christina's body inside the skin. Some think she dissolved into the blister fluid, her physical form breaking down as the blister consumed her. Others think she's still in there, impossibly small, compressed into the tiny space that remains inside the collapsed skin. The deflated skin is still at Katahdin's summit. Rangers have tried to remove it, but the skin won't detach from the rock. It's bonded there, a memorial to Christina Walsh, the hiker who became a blister, who transformed into a massive fluid-filled sack and hiked 2,290 miles as a person-shaped water balloon before bursting at the terminus. If you develop a blister that doesn't heal, that spreads and grows, leave the trail immediately. The cascade blistering can't be stopped once it starts. You'll gradually become one enormous blister, your body converting to fluid production, your skin stretching to contain hundreds or thousands of gallons. You'll keep hiking because the blister cushioning makes hiking easier, and you'll convince yourself it's fine, that you're adapting. But you're not adapting. You're becoming a blister. And when you finally finish, when you reach your goal, you'll burst. Your skin will rupture, your fluid will drain out, and whatever was left of the person inside will dissolve or disappear, leaving only empty skin to mark where a hiker used to be. Story 5. The Shelter Resident. Anthony Caldwell arrived at Shenandoah's Bird's Nest for shelter at dusk on a Wednesday in July. The shelter was occupied by one person, a man in his 50s sitting on a bunk, reading a book. "Room for one more?" Anthony asked. The man looked up. "Always room. Name's Warren." They shared the shelter that night, Warren friendly and knowledgeable about the trail. He gave Anthony tips about upcoming sections, warned him about rough terrain ahead. In the morning, Warren was still in his sleeping bag as Anthony packed and left. 2 days later, Anthony needed to resupply. He hiked 15 miles back to Bird's Nest 4 to meet a friend bringing supplies. Warren was there, sitting on the same bunk, reading. "Back already?" Warren said. "Had to resupply. You been here for 2 days? Weather's been nice. Decided to stay a bit." Anthony's friend arrived with supplies. Anthony packed up and headed north again. 5 days later, having hiked 60 miles, Anthony decided to rest. He backtracked to Bird's Nest 4, thinking it was a good shelter with water nearby. Warren was there. Same bunk, same book. "You again," Warren said cheerfully. "This shelter must be your favorite. Warren, you've been here for a week." "Has it been that long? Time moves different out here." Anthony found this strange but didn't press. Some people did take long 0 days at shelters. But over the next month, Anthony encountered Warren 3 more times, always at Bird's Nest 4, always sitting on the same bunk. Other hikers confirmed Warren's constant presence. "Oh yeah, the shelter guy, he's always there, been there since I passed through in May," a hiker named Lynn said. Anthony researched the shelter and found online posts going back years. Met a guy named Warren at Bird's Nest 4, super friendly, seems to live there. Posted in 2019. Another from 2017. Warren at Bird's Nest 4 gave great trail advice. Wonder how long he stays there. Warren had been at the shelter for at least 5 years, possibly longer. He wasn't camping nearby and visiting. He was a permanent resident of the shelter, never leaving, existing solely in that 3-walled structure. Anthony returned to Bird's Nest 4 to investigate. Warren was there as always. Anthony sat down and asked directly, "Warren, how long have you been at this shelter?" Warren looked up from his book. "Time's hard to track. A while. Years, maybe. I don't really leave anymore." "Why not?" "Can't remember how. I've been here so long I've forgotten how to not be here." Anthony noticed Warren's gear looked old but pristine. His sleeping bag was decades out of date but showed no wear. His boots were 1980s models but looked new. Warren himself didn't age. Anthony compared current photos to posts from 2017. Warren looked identical. "Warren, what year did you arrive at this shelter?" Warren thought for a long moment. 1982. I was through hiking. Stopped here for a night. Next morning I tried to leave, but I was still here. Every time I tried to hike out, I'd just end up back at the shelter. Eventually I stopped trying. You've been here for 40 years? If you say so. It doesn't feel that long. Days are short. I read. I talk to hikers. I sleep. Then it repeats. I don't age. Don't get hungry much. I exist in the shelter's time, which is different from trail time. Anthony felt his skin crawl. How do I make sure I don't get stuck like you? Don't stay too long. The shelter starts to claim you. First night is safe. Second night is risky. Third night you might not leave. I stayed 4 nights in 1982, waiting out rain. On the 5th morning I couldn't leave. Been here since. Anthony packed immediately and left. He hiked for 3 hours, checking his GPS constantly. He'd covered 6 miles north. But when he stopped for lunch, he looked back down the trail. Bird's Nest 4 was visible right behind him. Impossible. He'd hiked 6 miles away, but the shelter was following him. Anthony hiked faster, nearly running. He covered another 8 miles, looked back. The shelter was still behind him, closer now, matching his movement. He ran, full sprint, crashing through the trail. GPS showed him making progress, moving away from the shelter's fixed location. But when he glanced back, the shelter was still there, pursuing, getting closer. By evening, exhausted, Anthony stopped. He couldn't outrun it. The shelter appeared next to him, materializing fully. Warren was sitting on his bunk inside. "Stayed too long, didn't you?" Warren said. "Shelter's claiming you." Anthony tried to argue he'd only stayed one night. Warren shook his head. You came back multiple times. Each return counts as another night. You've stayed here 6 times, way past the threshold. Anthony checked his journal. Warren was right. He'd returned to Bird's Nest 4 6 times over the past month. Different nights, but each return had added to his total. He'd exceeded the 3-night limit. The shelter was claiming him. Over the next week, Anthony tried to escape, but every trail led back to the shelter. Every direction took him in a loop. He'd hike north for hours, then find himself approaching Bird's Nest 4 from the south. He'd hike east into the forest and emerge at the shelter from the west. The shelter had claimed him. He'd become its resident, trapped in its space, unable to leave. Anthony's time became untethered from normal time. Days blurred. He'd wake up thinking it was morning and discover it was afternoon, or evening, or the next week. Other hikers confirmed Anthony's disappearance. He was planning to reach Harper's Ferry, but no one's seen him. His GPS tracker stopped updating at Bird's Nest 4. Anthony and Warren now share the shelter permanently. 2 residents trapped in shelter time, unable to leave. They read books that never run out of pages. They talk to passing hikers who don't remember them from previous conversations. They exist in a loop centered on the shelter. More residents join periodically. A hiker named Dana got stuck in 2019, stayed too many nights while recovering from injury. A hiker named Kenji was trapped in 2021, returned too many times for water refills. 4 people now live at Bird's Nest 4, permanent residents, unable to leave, aging slowly or not at all, existing in shelter time that flows differently from trail time. If you stay at a shelter and return to it multiple times, count your nights carefully. 1 night is safe, 2 is risky, 3 and you're in danger. 4 or more nights, even spread across multiple visits, and the shelter starts claiming you. You'll try to leave, but find yourself looping back. You'll hike away, but the shelter will follow. Eventually, you'll accept it. Become a resident. Join the others trapped in shelter space. Bird's Nest 4 has 4 permanent residents now, but other shelters have residents too. Talk to long-term shelter occupants. Ask how long they've been there. Most have lost track. They're stuck, claimed by the shelters, unable to leave, existing in timeless loops. They'll tell you it's not so bad. Days are short. Time moves strangely. You stop aging. You exist in shelter time, which is eternal and unchanging. They'll seem content, even happy. But they can't leave. And if you stay too long, neither will you. You'll become a shelter resident, a permanent fixture, greeting passing hikers year after year, existing in a space that claimed you and won't let go. Story 6. The Trail Name Permanence. Samantha Rogers earned her trail name Blister on day 8 of her thru hike. She'd developed terrible blisters, complained about them constantly, and other hikers started calling her Blister. She accepted it good-naturedly, knowing trail names were tradition. But on day 20, Samantha tried to introduce herself to a new hiker using her real name. "Hi, I'm Samantha." The hiker looked confused. "Who?" "Samantha. Samantha Rogers." "I thought your name was Blister?" Samantha laughed. "That's just my trail name." But the hiker's confusion persisted. "Blister is your name. What's Samantha?" Over the next week, Samantha noticed something disturbing. No one responded to Samantha anymore. Only Blister. She'd introduce herself with her real name, and people would look at her blankly until she said Blister. At a trail town, Samantha went to the post office to collect a resupply package sent to Samantha Rogers. The clerk couldn't find it. "No package for that name." "Check under Rogers." The clerk searched. Nothing. Samantha described the package. The clerk's face cleared. "Oh, you mean the package for Blister? Yes, we have that." The package label clearly showed Samantha Rogers. but the postal system read it as Blister. Her trail name had overwritten her real name in all records. Samantha checked her driver's license. It showed her photo, but the name read Blister. Her credit card said Blister. Her phone contacts listed her as Blister. Her legal name had been replaced by her trail name. She called her mother. "Mom, it's Samantha." "Who?" "Your daughter, Samantha." "I don't have a daughter named Samantha. Do you mean Blister?" Samantha's heart raced. "Mom, you named me Samantha, Samantha Rogers. You gave birth to me 27 years ago." "Are you feeling okay, Blister? You're not making sense." Her own mother didn't remember her real name. The trail name had rewritten reality. Everyone who knew Samantha now knew only Blister. Every record, every document, every memory had been altered. Samantha, she still thought of herself as Samantha, tried to find evidence of her original name. She searched online for Samantha Rogers. The search returned results about Blister, showing her social media accounts, her work history, everything, all listed under the trail name. At a library, she looked up her birth certificate. It showed she was born Blister Rogers. Her parents were listed as having named their daughter Blister. The trail name had retroactively become her permanent legal name. She encountered other hikers with similar experiences. A hiker called Slow Poke could no longer make anyone understand his real name was David. A hiker named Sunshine had legally been renamed by the trail, her birth certificate and all records showing Sunshine as her given name. "Trail names become permanent," Slow Poke explained. "Once the trail community calls you something consistently, it overwrites your real name, not just socially, legally, historically, retroactively. You become what the trail calls you." Samantha tried legally changing her name back. But when she filed paperwork to change from Blister to Samantha, the court rejected it. "You can't change your name to one you're already using. Your name is Blister Rogers. It's always been Blister Rogers." "But that's my trail name. My real name is Samantha." The clerk showed her records. Birth certificate, social security card, passport, all said Blister. "Ma'am, I understand trail names are important to you, but you can't claim Samantha is your real name when all documents show you've always been named Blister." Samantha's identity was being erased. 27 years of being Samantha Rogers had been overwritten. The trail had renamed her, and reality had adjusted to match. She tried to remember her childhood as Samantha. The memories were fading, being called Blister by her parents, friends calling her Blister in school. Every memory was changing, her real name being replaced by the trail name throughout her personal history. Other hikers warned her it would get worse. Trail names don't just change your name, they change you. If your trail name is Blister, you'll start embodying that, developing more blisters, becoming defined by blistering. The name shapes reality. Samantha noticed she was getting more blisters. Even with proper foot care, new blisters formed daily. Her feet were becoming permanently blistered, as if her body was conforming to her trail name. A hiker named Turtle had become slower over time. "I used to be a fast hiker, but once they named me Turtle, I slowed down. Couldn't help it, my body matched the name. Now I'm the slowest hiker on the trail, crawling along like a turtle." A hiker called Rain attracted storms. "It's been raining on me for 6 weeks, just me. Other hikers walk in sunshine, but I'm always under clouds. The trail named me Rain, so I bring rain wherever I go." Samantha's blistering worsened. Her feet were covered in permanent blisters that never healed. New ones formed on her hands, her legs. She was becoming Blister entirely, her body transforming to match the name. She tried to get a new trail name, convinced other hikers to call her something else. But the new names wouldn't stick. Everyone reverted to Blister. The trail had decided her name, and the trail's decision was permanent. By Vermont, Samantha had accepted she was Blister. Her memories of being Samantha Rogers were almost gone. She remembered a childhood as Blister, parents who'd named her Blister, a life lived as Blister. The trail name had completely overwritten her identity. Her body had transformed too. She was covered in permanent blisters, her skin perpetually inflamed and painful. She embodied her trail name fully. She was Blister, walking personification of blisters, unable to remember who she'd been before the trail renamed her. At Katahdin, Blister finished her thru hike. She'd completed the trail as Blister, having forgotten entirely that she'd once been Samantha. The trail name was her only name, her only identity. After finishing, Blister tried to return to normal life. But normal life doesn't accommodate someone named Blister whose body is covered in permanent blisters. Jobs rejected her. Her appearance scared people. She existed as a trail name in a world that wanted real names. Blister returned to the trail. She's been hiking for 3 years now, continuously walking, unable to integrate into society, permanently Blister. She meets other permanent trail names. Turtle, who can't move fast enough for normal life. Rain, who's always followed by storms. Sunshine, who glows slightly and can't be in darkness. They're the trail named hikers whose trail names became so permanent they erased their original identities. They hike continuously because that's the only context where their names make sense. They're living trail names, embodiments of nicknames that became reality. If you're thru hiking and someone gives you a trail name, choose carefully. Once it sticks, once the trail community consistently calls you that name, it starts becoming permanent. It overwrites your legal name, your records, your memories. You become the trail name. Your body will conform to it. Your reality will reshape around it. Don't accept joke names. Don't accept names that describe negative traits, because you'll become that trait, permanently, retroactively, completely. The trail names its hikers, and the names become true. Samantha Rogers became Blister, and now Blister is all she is, all she'll ever be. Forever covered in blisters, forever walking trails, forever unable to be anyone other than the name the trail gave her on day 8. Story 7. The Mile Reduction. Vincent Park checked his GPS on day 60 of his thru hike. Total miles hiked, 987. He was on track, progressing well. The next day, he hiked 22 miles. His GPS showed 1,009 total miles. Math checked out. On day 62, Vincent checked again. Total miles 1,006. He'd lost 3 miles, impossible. GPS devices don't count backwards. He assumed a syncing error and continued hiking. Day 63, after another 20-mile day, his GPS showed 1,023 miles. Correct math. Day 64, 1,039 miles. Day 65, 1,033 miles. He'd lost 6 miles overnight without hiking backwards. Vincent compared his GPS history to his journal entries. The GPS was revising past miles downward. Sections he'd hiked were being reduced. A 15-mile day would be retroactively changed to 12 miles. A 20-mile day would become 16 miles. His accumulated mileage was shrinking. At a shelter, Vincent met another hiker named Paolo, who had the same problem. My GPS has been losing miles for 2 weeks. I've hiked 100 miles according to my journal, but my GPS shows 940. I'm losing a mile or 2 every day. They compared data. Both were experiencing mile reduction. The trail was taking back mileage retroactively, reducing their progress, erasing miles they'd completed. The trail doesn't want us to finish, Paolo said. It's removing miles as we add them. We hike forward, but our progress decreases. Eventually, we'll hike forever and never reach Katahdin. Vincent tracked this carefully. He hiked 20 miles. GPS showed he'd moved forward 20 miles, but the next morning his total accumulated miles had decreased by 3. Net gain, 17 miles. At this rate, Vincent would need to hike more than 2,500 actual miles to complete the 2,290-mile trail. The reduction worsened. By Pennsylvania, Vincent was losing 5 miles per day. He'd hiked 25 miles, gained 20 net. By New York, he was losing 8 miles per day. 30-mile hiking days resulted in 22 miles net progress. Other hikers confirmed the phenomenon. Mile reduction happens to some people. The trail takes back your miles. You hike more than 2,190 but never finish because the finish line keeps receding. Vincent pushed harder, hiked 35-mile days, but the reduction matched his increase. He was losing 10 miles per day now. Net progress, 25 miles. He was working twice as hard for the same forward progress. By Vermont, Vincent was losing 15 miles per day. He had to hike 40 miles to make 25 miles net progress. His body was breaking down from the extreme mileage. But if he hiked less, his net progress would be tiny. Paulo had quit. "I can't do it. I hiked 400 actual miles, but my GPS shows 890. I'm moving backward. The trail is taking more miles than I'm adding." Vincent checked his numbers. He'd hiked 1,780 actual miles. His GPS showed 1,456. The trail had stolen 324 miles from him. Those miles had been hiked, experienced, completed, but they'd been retroactively erased. Vincent read about mile reduction in old trail journals. A hiker in 1998 had experienced it. He'd hiked over 3,000 actual miles trying to complete the 2,290-mile trail. Never finished. The mile reduction exceeded his daily hiking capacity. He was losing miles faster than he could add them. By New Hampshire, Vincent was losing 25 miles per day. He had to hike 50 miles daily just to make 25 miles net progress. 50-mile days, every day, just to maintain pace. His body couldn't sustain it. He tried to understand why this was happening. One theory: the trail resented fast hikers and punished them by reducing miles. Another theory: certain hikers disturbed the trail's balance and were forced to hike extra miles as penance. A third theory from a trail maintainer named Ellen: the trail isn't 2,190 miles for everyone. For some people it's longer, much longer. The official distance is an average, but individual hikers experience different trail lengths. You're experiencing a 4,000-mile trail compressed into the space of a 2,190-mile trail. Your GPS is showing your true progress on your actual trail length. If Ellen was right, Vincent's trail was approximately 3,500 miles long. He'd need to hike 3,500 actual miles to complete what everyone else did in 2,190. The mile reduction wasn't theft, it was reality asserting the true length of his personal trail. Vincent was at 1,890 GPS miles, having hiked 2,100 actual miles. If his trail was 3,500 miles, he still had 1,710 miles remaining. But he'd only have 300 actual miles of trail left before reaching Katahdin. The numbers didn't work. He'd run out of physical trail before completing his personal trail distance. At Katahdin's base, Vincent checked his GPS. 2,145 miles. He'd hiked 2,150 actual miles, still 45 GPS miles short of finishing. But Katahdin was right there, the terminus, the end of the physical trail. Vincent climbed Katahdin. At the summit, he checked his GPS. 2,187 miles, 3 miles short. He'd climbed the final mountain but hadn't completed his trail. The mile reduction had left him permanently unfinished. He touched the terminus sign. Nothing happened. No sense of completion, no finish line crossed. Vincent had reached the physical end of the AT but hadn't completed his personal trail length. He descended Katahdin, hiked back south, climbed again. GPS showed 2,189 miles, 1 mile short. He repeated the climb. GPS showed 2,190 miles exactly. Vincent waited for some sense of completion. Nothing. The mile reduction had left him at exactly 2,190 GPS miles, but he didn't feel finished. He'd hiked over 2,600 actual miles, but it wasn't enough. He climbed Katahdin a fourth time. GPS showed 2,289 miles. He'd lost a mile. The reduction was continuing even after reaching the terminus. His personal trail length was increasing faster than he could hike. Vincent has summited Katahdin 67 times. Each time his GPS shows between 2,787 and 2,191 miles. He can never get above 2,191. The mile reduction balances perfectly with his climbing, keeping him eternally at the threshold of finishing without ever completing. He lives in Baxter State Park now, hiking Katahdin daily, trying to accumulate enough GPS miles to truly finish. But the reduction continues. For every mile he gains, the trail takes one back. He's stuck at the terminus, having reached the end physically but never mathematically. Other hikers experiencing mile reduction face the same fate. They reach Katahdin having hiked thousands of actual miles, but their GPS shows them short of 2,990. They're incomplete finishers, having run out of physical trail before completing their personal trail length. Some hike Katahdin repeatedly like Vincent. Others return south and hike random sections, trying to accumulate missing miles. But the reduction continues. The trail takes back miles faster than they can be added. If your GPS starts losing miles, if your total distance decreases overnight, you're experiencing mile reduction. Your personal trail is longer than 2,290 miles. You'll need to hike thousands of actual miles to complete it. And if the reduction rate exceeds your hiking capacity, you'll never finish. You'll reach Katahdin, touch the sign, and still be miles short. You'll join Vincent and the others permanently incomplete, hiking the same mountains over and over, trying to accumulate miles. The trail keeps stealing, chasing a finish line that recedes faster than you can walk toward it. Story 8. The Duplicate Trail. Hannah Chen was hiking through the Smokies on day 38 when she noticed the duplicate. About 50 feet to her left, parallel to the AT, was another trail. Same white blazes, same maintenance level, same everything. Two identical Appalachian trails running side by side. Hannah stopped and stared. This wasn't a blue-blazed side trail. This was another AT, complete copy, running parallel. She checked her map. No trail should be there, but visually there were definitely two identical trails. She called to a hiker ahead of her. "Do you see two trails?" The hiker, a man named Curtis, looked confused. "What do you mean? There's just the AT." "No, look, there are two identical trails, one here, one there." Curtis looked where she pointed. "I only see forest. The AT is the only trail." Hannah walked to the duplicate trail, stepped onto it. White blazes were visible, identical to the main AT's blazes. The trail surface was maintained clear, obviously used. But Curtis insisted he saw only forest where Hannah was standing. "You're standing in the woods," Curtis said. "There's no trail there." Hannah took photos of the duplicate trail. In the images, it looked identical to the main AT. But when she showed Curtis, he saw only forest photos. The duplicate trail wasn't visible to everyone. Over the next week, Hannah saw more duplicates. Sometimes two ATs, sometimes three running parallel. Always identical, always fully maintained, always invisible to other hikers. Hannah could walk between them freely, switching from one AT to another. But other hikers saw her stepping on and off the trail randomly. At a shelter, Hannah met another hiker experiencing duplicates. A woman named Jade who was seeing 5 parallel ATs. Started 2 weeks ago. Now there are 5 identical trails all running together. I can hike any of them. They're all equally real. They compared notes. Both saw white-blazed identical trails running parallel to the main AT. Both could access the duplicates freely, but most hikers saw nothing. The duplicate trails existed for some people, but not others. "I think they're alternate versions," Jade said. "Like parallel universes. Same trail, slightly different timelines. We're seeing multiple versions of the AT existing simultaneously." Hannah tested this. She hiked on the main AT for an hour, then switched to a duplicate. The duplicate led to the same shelters and landmarks, but details were slightly different. Shelter logs contained different entries. Trail conditions varied slightly. The duplicate was the AT, but from a different timeline or dimension. By Virginia, Hannah was seeing 11 duplicate trails. 11 identical ATs running parallel, each slightly different. She'd switch between them, experiencing variations. One duplicate had more hikers, another had fewer. One had perfect weather, another had constant rain. Each was real, each was the AT, but they existed in separate, overlapping realities. Jade was up to 17 duplicates. I'm losing track of which one is the original. They're all equally real. I think I'm existing in multiple timelines simultaneously. Hannah noticed she could see other hikers on the duplicate trails. People who weren't visible on the main AT. When she asked these hikers about themselves, they insisted they were on the AT hiking normally. But main trail hikers couldn't see them. The duplicate trail hikers existed in parallel versions of the trail. One duplicate trail hiker, a man named Felix, explained his understanding. The AT doesn't exist in just one reality. It exists in hundreds of parallel timelines. Most people can only perceive their own timeline's version, but some of us see multiple versions. We're unstuck from singular reality. We can move between the parallel ATs freely. Hannah started experimenting. She'd hike on one duplicate, set up camp, then switch to another duplicate. Her tent would still be there, existing in both timelines. She was spreading herself across multiple versions of the trail simultaneously. By Pennsylvania, Hannah was seeing 47 duplicate trails. 47 identical ATs, all parallel, all real. She'd lost track of which one was original. She'd hike a section on duplicate 12, switch to duplicate 29, then to duplicate 3. Each felt equally real. Each had its own hikers, its own conditions, its own version of events. The duplicates began diverging more dramatically. One version had the trail rerouted differently. Another had shelters in different locations. A third had completely different weather patterns. The parallel ATs were becoming less identical, branching into distinctly separate timelines. Hannah encountered versions of herself on other duplicates. Other Hannahs making different decisions, hiking different paces. One Hannah had quit in Virginia. Another Hannah had gotten injured in Tennessee. A third Hannah was weeks ahead. They were all real, all hiking, all experiencing their own versions of the trail. Meeting herself was disorienting. The other Hannahs could see her too, aware they were encountering parallel versions. They'd compare experiences, share advice across timelines. Hannah learned things from her other selves that helped her navigate her own timeline's trail. By New Hampshire, Hannah had lost singular identity. She existed in 127 different timelines simultaneously. Hiking 127 parallel ATs, experiencing 127 different versions of the through hike. Her consciousness was distributed across all of them. She wasn't one person anymore. She was a collective of Hannahs spread across parallel realities. She'd switch between timelines constantly, sometimes mid-step. One moment hiking in sunshine on duplicate 47, next moment in rain on duplicate 83. Her experience was fractured across realities. She couldn't maintain focus on a single timeline. Other multi-timeline hikers described similar experiences. Jade was spread across 300-plus duplicates. Felix was in 500-plus. They existed as distributed consciousnesses, unable to consolidate back into singular beings. I don't remember which timeline is home, Jade said. She looked different in every timeline Hannah encountered her, wearing different clothes at different ages with different injuries. I've been hiking for 6 months in some timelines, 3 years in others. I don't know which version of me is real. Hannah reached Katadine in 187 different timelines. In some, she'd hiked fast and finished in 4 months. In others, she'd taken years. Each version of her touched the summit sign, completed their respective thru-hike. But Hannah's consciousness experienced all 187 completions simultaneously. She finished the trail 187 times at once, each version slightly different. But in other timelines, Hannah never finished. She quit, got injured, got lost, died. Her consciousness was still connected to those versions too. Hannah existed in finished states and unfinished states simultaneously, spread across hundreds of parallel ATs. She tried to consolidate back into singular reality, but Hannah couldn't remember how. She'd existed as distributed consciousness for so long that being a single person in a single timeline was no longer possible. She was permanently multi-timeline, permanently fractured across parallel ATs. Hannah still hikes. All her versions hike simultaneously. You might encounter one Hannah who's northbound in Georgia, another Hannah southbound in Maine, a third Hannah who's been at the same shelter for a year. They're all real, all the same person, all different versions existing in parallel timelines that overlap imperfectly. If you start seeing duplicate trails, parallel versions of the AT running beside the main trail, don't investigate. Don't walk onto the duplicates. They're real, and you can access them, but accessing them splits your consciousness. You'll start existing in multiple timelines simultaneously. You'll become distributed across parallel versions of yourself, unable to consolidate, unable to be singular again. The trail exists in hundreds of realities. Most people hike just one. But some, like Hannah and Jade and Felix, see them all. They become multi-timeline beings hiking all versions of the AT at once, existing in parallel, unable to choose a single reality because they've become all realities. 187 Hannahs finished the trail. 312 Hannahs never finished. All are equally real. All are the same person. All exist simultaneously in the infinite parallel duplicates of the Appalachian Trail. Story 9. The Night Extension. Robert Hayes was hiking through Virginia in early August when he noticed the days were getting shorter. Not seasonally shorter, drastically shorter. On August 3rd, sunrise was at 6:15 a.m. and sunset at 8:30 p.m. Normal summer hours, but on August 4th, sunset came at 7:45 p.m. August 5th, 7 p.m. August 6th, 6:15 p.m. Robert checked astronomy websites. They confirmed sunset should be around 8:25 p.m. for his location. But he watched the sunset at 6:15 p.m. 45 minutes of darkness appeared where daylight should be. Other hikers didn't notice. At a shelter, Robert asked when sunset had occurred. Everyone said 8:30-ish. But Robert's watch, his GPS, his direct observation all showed 6:15 p.m. He'd gained 2 extra hours of darkness that no one else experienced. The pattern continued. Each day, Robert experienced 15 to 45 minutes less daylight. By August 12th, sunset was coming at 4 p.m. for him, while other hikers experienced normal 8:20 p.m. sunsets. Robert was hiking in darkness for 4 extra hours each day. "Your watch must be wrong," a hiker named Chelsea suggested, but Robert's watch matched his GPS, matched his phone, matched his direct observation of the sun setting. For him, sunset was objectively earlier. The day was shrinking. The extended nights were completely dark. No twilight, no ambient light. The moment sunset hit, full darkness fell. Robert hiked by headlamp for hours while other hikers walked in apparent daylight. "You're walking in full sun," Chelsea said, watching Robert use his headlamp at 5 p.m. "Why are you using a light? It's pitch black. It's bright daylight." They were experiencing different times. Robert's day was compressed, his nights extended. Chelsea and other hikers lived in normal time. Robert was slipping into a timeline where nights lasted longer and days were shorter. By August 20th, Robert's days were only 6 hours long, Sunrise at 6:15 a.m., sunset at 12:15 p.m. He hiked in darkness from noon until next sunrise. 18 hours of night, 6 hours of day. He tried to stay in towns, hike only during his compressed daylight. But accommodation owners insisted they weren't open at noon when Robert claimed it was night. Robert's time had divorced from consensus time. He existed in personal darkness that no one else experienced. The darkness was absolute. No stars, no moon, no ambient light, just void. Robert hiked through black nothingness, his headlamp creating a small bubble of visibility. The trail existed in his headlamp beam, but beyond that was perfect black. He encountered other hikers in the darkness. People hiking without lights, walking through what they insisted was daylight, while Robert experienced total darkness. They'd pass each other, Robert in night, them in day, occupying the same space but different times. By September, Robert's days were 2 hours long. Sunrise 6:15 a.m., sunset 8:15 a.m., 22 hours of darkness. Robert was hiking almost entirely at night, in a darkness so complete he could barely function. His headlamp battery life became critical. Robert carried multiple batteries, solar chargers, backup lights. Running out of light in this darkness meant being unable to see his own hands. The darkness was deeper than normal night. It was temporal darkness, absence of day, void where daylight should exist. Robert met another hiker experiencing night extension, a woman named Patricia who'd been hiking in extended darkness for 3 weeks. Her days were 1 hour long. She experienced 23 hours of night. "We're falling into permanent night," Patricia said. "The day is being compressed out of our timeline. Eventually, we'll have no daylight at all, just eternal darkness. We'll hike the AT in perpetual night." Robert asked if there was a way to reverse it. Patricia shook her head. "The night extension only increases. Days get shorter, nights longer. I've talked to 3 other hikers who experienced this. All of them reached 0 daylight. They're hiking in permanent darkness now. Been dark for months. They navigate by touch and memory, their headlamps barely penetrating the void." By mid-September, Robert's days were 30 minutes long. Sunrise 6:15 a.m., sunset 6:45 a.m. 23 and a half hours of darkness. He hiked almost entirely in the void, brief 30-minute dawn periods, his only light. The darkness affected his body. Robert's circadian rhythm collapsed. He couldn't sleep properly because there wasn't enough darkness distinction from waking. He existed in constant night, trying to maintain schedules in timelessness. He encountered hikers in permanent darkness. People who'd reached 0 daylight hiking in eternal night. They'd been in darkness for months, maybe years. Their eyes had adapted, becoming large and light-sensitive. They moved like blind people, feeling the trail, navigating by memory and touch. One permanent night hiker, a man named Douglas, explained his experience. "Day 0 came 6 months ago. Sun hasn't risen since. I hike in complete darkness. No light exists in my timeline, just eternal night. I've adapted. My other senses are stronger. I can feel the trail, hear landmarks, navigate without sight." Robert dreaded reaching day 0. He tried to slow the compression, hiking less, resting more. But the night extension was independent of his activity. Each day his daylight decreased by predictable amounts. October 3rd, Robert experienced his last dawn. Sunrise 6:15 a.m., sunset 6:17 a.m. 2 minutes of daylight. He stood at a vista and watched his final sun exposure. 2 minutes of light, then eternal darkness. October 4th, Robert woke at what should be dawn. No light came. He waited hours, no sunrise. His timeline had reached 0 daylight. He'd entered permanent night. The darkness was total and eternal. Robert hiked by a headlamp, the only light in a world that had no day. His small beam was the entire visible universe. Beyond it was void. He adapted slowly, His eyes changed, pupils permanently dilated, seeking non-existent light. His other senses heightened. He learned to feel the trail with his feet, navigate by sound, sense obstacles before seeing them. But the psychological impact was severe. Eternal darkness broke his sense of time. Without day-night cycles, Robert couldn't track how long he'd been hiking. Days blurred into endless walking through void. He'd check his GPS and discover weeks had passed that felt like hours, or hours that felt like weeks. Other permanent night hikers formed a community. They'd gather at shelters, trading strategies for navigating eternal darkness. Some had been dark for years, their bodies transformed by permanent night. Pale skin, enlarged eyes, heightened hearing. They looked like cave-adapted creatures. Robert hiked in darkness for what his GPS said was 7 months. He reached Katahdin, climbed it in total darkness, his headlamp illuminating nothing but immediate trail. At the summit, Robert touched the sign, completing his thru hike in a timeline that had no day. But there was no sunrise celebration, no summit views. Just darkness and a sign he could barely see. Robert had finished the AT but experienced none of the final moments in light. His thru hike ended in the same eternal night it had become. Robert tried to leave the trail, but the darkness followed him. His timeline's permanent night wasn't location-specific. Everywhere he went, darkness persisted. The sun didn't rise in towns, cities, or home. He existed in personal eternal night. He lives in darkness now. Works night shifts because day shifts don't exist in his timeline. Navigates by headlamp and memory. His timeline compressed daylight to zero, leaving only eternal night. Robert exists in permanent darkness, unable to experience day, unable to see sunlight, trapped in a timeline where the sun set for the last time months ago and will never rise again. If you're hiking and notice sunset coming earlier than scheduled, track it carefully. The night extension means you're slipping into a compressed timeline. Days will get shorter, nights longer, until eventually you reach zero daylight. You'll enter permanent night, eternal darkness, and never see the sun again. You'll finish your thru hike in void, touch the summit sign in blackness, and live the rest of your life in personal eternal night. While everyone around you experiences normal daylight you can no longer perceive. The day will be gone, compressed to nothing, leaving only endless night. Story 10. The Final Step. Maria Gonzalez was one step away from finishing her thru hike. Literally one step. She'd summited Katahdin, touched the sign with her right foot planted firmly. Her left foot was raised, ready to place down, completing the final moment. But her left foot wouldn't descend. Maria stood frozen, right foot on the ground, left foot suspended in air. Unable to complete the step, she tried to lower her foot. Her muscles wouldn't respond. Her left leg was locked in raised position, frozen mid-step. She tried to move her right foot, shift her weight, complete the motion in a different way. But her right foot was locked too. Maria was frozen at the summit of Katahdin, one step away from completion, unable to move. Other hikers congratulated her, took photos, moved on. Maria remained frozen. They assumed she was posing for an extended photo. After 10 minutes, someone asked if she was okay. "I can't move," Maria said. "I'm stuck." A hiker named Derek tried to help her. He pushed her raised foot down. It wouldn't move. He tried lifting her planted foot. It was immovable. Maria was locked in position, one step from completion, unable to finish. Rangers were called. They examined Maria, tested her movement. Every part of her body worked except the frozen step. She could move her arms, turn her head, bend at the waist, but her legs were locked in the final step position. Right foot down, left foot up, mid-stride. "Can you hop on your right foot?" a ranger asked. Maria tried. Her right foot wouldn't lift. She was planted. "Can you lower yourself to sitting?" Maria tried bending her knees. They wouldn't bend. She was locked standing, frozen in the exact position of her final step. They considered carrying her down. But Maria's body was rigid. She couldn't be moved from the spot. Multiple people pushed and pulled. Maria didn't budge. She was fixed at Katahdin's summit, frozen one step from completion. Medical evacuation was attempted, but helicopters couldn't lift her. Maria's body was somehow anchored to the summit. She weighed normal amounts when tested, but no force could move her from her position. Maria spent her first night frozen at the summit. Rangers brought blankets, food, water. She could eat and drink using her arms, but her legs remained locked. Day 2, day 3. Maria stood frozen at Katahdin's summit, one step from finishing. Other hikers experiencing the same thing began appearing. A man named Chen who'd frozen mid-step at Katahdin 2 years earlier. He'd been standing at the summit for 2 years, 1 foot up, unable to complete his final step. "We're frozen at completion," Chen explained. "The trail won't let us finish. We reached the end, but the final moment is suspended. We're stuck in the instant before completion, unable to finish, unable to leave." More frozen finishers stood around Katahdin's summit. 14 people, all locked in final step positions. Some had been frozen for years. They'd become fixtures of the summit, permanent statues of almost finished thru-hikers. Maria tried everything to complete her step: physical therapy, meditation, medical intervention. Nothing worked. Her body was locked in that one position, the final step suspended indefinitely. She existed at the summit, unable to descend, unable to finish. Rangers brought supplies. Other hikers would summit, take photos with the frozen finishers, then descend and finish while Maria remained stuck. "Why us?" Maria asked Chen. "I don't know. Maybe we wanted it too much. Maybe the trail doesn't want to let go. Maybe finishing is impossible and we're the first to discover it. Everyone else thinks they finished, but maybe they're all frozen in final moments too, just in different ways." Maria's consciousness began to fragment. Part of her was frozen at the summit, but part of her felt like she'd completed the step, descended, returned home. She'd exist in 2 states simultaneously, frozen at Katahdin and finished with life continuing. She couldn't tell which was real. She'd have conversations with rangers, then realize hours had passed in seconds, or seconds had passed in hours. Time became unstable around the frozen finishers. They existed in the moment before completion, which was a timeless moment, eternal and unchanging. More hikers froze at the summit. By the following summer, 27 frozen finishers stood at Katahdin, all locked in final steps, unable to complete, unable to leave. They'd become part of the mountain, permanent, incomplete thru-hikers. Maria stopped trying to complete her step. She accepted being frozen. She existed as a warning to other finishers. Maybe you can't actually finish. Maybe the trail never ends. Maybe completion is an illusion, and every finisher is secretly frozen in their final moment, experiencing an eternal instant of almost finishing that feels like finishing but isn't. If you thru-hike to Katahdin and raise your foot for your final step, maybe it won't descend. Maybe you'll freeze like Maria, like Chen, like the 27 others, locked in the moment before completion, unable to finish, unable to leave. Existing eternally at the summit, one step away from finishing, suspended in the instant before completion that never completes. The trail doesn't want to end, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe every finisher is frozen in their final moment, experiencing an eternal illusion of completion while their body stands locked at Katahdin, one step raised forever.